Hello, everybody.
I feel terrible, but I have a delicious plate of food in front of me. I hope it's okay that I'm eating my dinner.
Enjoy. Bon appetit.
Thank you.
You just have to share.
We're doing Friday candy.
Apparently, it's a New York
Okay.
Times
love
recipe. It's like scallops with peach and corn and tomatoes and parsley. Amazing.
Good to see all of you. I think we're live now. So let's start. Dear travelers, both Nomadmania, our travel community, and everybody in this panel, I'm really proud that you have the faith in us to inspire you to travel and to travel with your children. We basically are pretty sure that all of you are already good travelers, already well traveled, and that you either are already traveling with your children or that you are considering whether you can keep traveling as much as you do if you choose to have children. So basically, we're hoping that this is what we will gain from today and the value we will bring you. To all of the participants, we would love to hear from you in the comments to let us know that you're there, maybe where you're from, and if you're traveling with kids and what ages. Then we will try to put that into our answers as well, to make this as relevant as and interactive as possible. So please go ahead and do that. With me today, I have 6 experienced travel and well-traveled parents. They are all somebody who's traveled so much themselves, and they've traveled with their children. At the same time, they're quite different. So we really hope that you will learn from a wide variety of travel experiences today. We've also chosen men and women equally. This is not a coincidence. We're a huge panel. So obviously, if I ask just 2 questions and everybody speaks for a long time, this is going to be a very lengthy response to 2 different questions, and that only. So what we've agreed to do is that we will have a wider selection of questions, but then that just having 2, maybe 3 of us answering them and trying to do it somewhat shorter and more well prepared. So it's possible to get a broader variety of inspiration from this sort of about 1 hour webinar. But you should definitely meet everybody to have an idea who these people are and where you can follow them and get inspiration from them and reach out to them later. I am really happy and proud that I get to be the host of this. My name is Mette Ehlers Mikkelsen. I am a mother of 3 of the age of 15 to 22. I have traveled with them since they were born, as I myself traveled with my parents since I was born. I am 1 country short of visiting every country in the world, and I have brought my kids to by far most countries they have visited, which is between 85 and 130 countries each. I try to speak and blog on expanding our horizon about traveling in order basically to hope to inspire others to do the same. So, brief introduction to the rest of you. How about you, Søren? 7 summits.
7 summits, Søren. Yes, my name is Søren. I am 60 and have a son who's 7 now. Was divorced 2 years ago, so the first 5 years of his life we were traveling also with his mother. Since during my climbing career, I was obviously traveling to countries that was sometimes a little bit physically rough, and I haven't taken the kid to such places yet, but we will probably get there. He's used to getting outdoors, tending, having fires, cooking on fires, and things like that. I think the challenge today is to find people he can play with if we travel alone, him and me. Ja, hvad siger du, ven? Er den gået i stykker? We have a little technical issue on the other. He has something going on the screen to entertain him. I'll have to go and look after it.
Tell something about the multitasking
We are house
capability.
with more than one PC, or we had the serious problem.
Check. Jennifer, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jennifer. We are a family of 5 traveling together. We've been to 150 countries roughly altogether. And my family includes 3 teenagers now. We've been traveling since they were babies, domestically and internationally since they were 3, 4, and 5. So it's been quite the transition. But it's been amazing to see them grow and us grow as a family when we travel and relocate around the world. So you can follow our adventures on Insta at Clayburn Coordinates.
Perfect. And Merete, how about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Merete. I'm from Denmark, and I'm a single mom half the time, and I travel with my daughter who's now 12, growing on 25. She'll be 13 next month. Before I got her, I traveled with Doctors Without Borders for many years, with whom I still work. And when I got her, my daughter, we started traveling right away with my ex-partner, and now I've been traveling along with her since she was 4 years old. And I call our travel Globetrotter education, because I think there is much to learn about life and about yourself when you travel, as much as there is about cultures, destinations, and so on. So very happy to be here today. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And Jason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Forgash. I don't have any blogs or anything. If you want to get a hold of me, you can just email me at jasonforgash@gmail.com. I would say that what I maybe have to share today is probably the most mundane amongst the all these incredible speakers. I started traveling with my kids years ago when I was working full-time and in a full-time doctoral program, and traveling one-on-one with them. We travel as a family every year, but traveling one-on-one with them really allowed me to connect. And then we never stopped doing it. So I have a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and they've been to, I think, 50, 60 countries each. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the questions from the audience.
Perfect. Wonderful. And Vani, please.
Hi, my name is Wani. So originally I'm from Malaysia, but I live in Switzerland, and my boys are 9, turning 8 and 6. I'm a divorced parent, so sometimes I travel alone with the 3 kids. So I've done things like flying on my own with 3 kids when they were 5, 4, and 3, or 6, 4, and 3 to Nicaragua during COVID. And yeah, the oldest one visited 33 countries in 6 continents at the age of 3. So, and you can follow me on my travels at Travel Muse Family. And I've been to 143 countries now.
Very inspiring. And Philip.
Yeah, my name is Philip. We are a family of 4. We have 2 kids. They are 6 and still 3 years old, turning 4 soon. Actually, we already traveled before we had the children quite a lot. And also after our first son was born, we continued traveling. We were traveling during the parental leave, for example, as a family together on the Trans-Siberian Railway from Vladivostok, crossing through all of Russia into Mongolia, and then through Central Asia and back to Moscow and back to Munich when our son was between around 8 months old. And after that, we also continued to travel quite a lot. I traveled with my older son. I did a 2-week trip already in 2019, and also in 22 with our both sons. And last year in autumn, I did quite a big trip for 4 weeks with both of them to South America, traveling through Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru, and Paraguay. And it's a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise, we're going to hear much more about those trips in a second. And I know you're not so much on social media, Philip, but you have
No, not
the kids'
personally,
mother
but
are on social media as Mama Wildenbummel, yeah?
exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. I think we should go straight to sort of the first question, which is traveling kids approximately age 4. Because in our Nomad Mania poll on visiting or traveling with children, actually that's sort of the first group over infants that is on, and where a lot of people are starting to travel, and the kids being more conscious about what they experience as such. So I know a few of you have traveled a lot with your children at that age, and a few of them are still this age. But I know, Philip, your sons still are around that age, so maybe you wish to start.
Yeah, actually, it's for me, it's quite important. You need to think about the planning what you do. So you need to do it a little bit more leisurely, to have more breaks in between, and to find some interesting places for the boys. For me, it's actually quite easy because especially our older one, he loves nature, and you just need to put him somewhere close to nature, and he will find something to do. So this is quite comfortable, but you need more time to travel. And I try to travel only during daytime, so not to spend too much time on night buses or something like that, because this usually creates problems the next day. If you cannot get into your hotel room, find sleep, and all of the day will be quite a challenge, especially to you as the adult. And the other thing, and this is personally for me quite important, you need, or I absolutely make sure that I can carry all the luggage on my own, and that I can also carry the smaller child. So in this case, David, to make sure, especially using public transport, because if you're not able to carry everything that you have with you, you have a serious issue getting from one place to another if you don't have a cab available or something like that.
That is a good point. Yeah, definitely. Son, you said something about also finding other kids to play with when you travel with your son. He's not that old either.
Yeah, I think maybe. Well, I have two comments on 4. Yeah, up till that age, we used to carry, or I used to carry him on my back when we were hiking, and then at some stage he's too heavy for me to carry up the mountains, and at the same time he get too impatient to be sitting such place and for hours. So I would say 4 years is a bit of a challenge because he starts to be more moving around himself, and so you have to choose where you do and what you do more careful than before that. In terms of playmates, he didn't need that so much at 4. That's more now when he's 7. So at the time we didn't think about going a place where there were other kids, but I do that now. And also because we were 2 parents taking care of him at 4, so that wasn't a problem. But being with him alone, I think I want to go places where he can meet other kids.
Makes sense. Vani, your 3 boys are of an age where you can still remember them being 4 rather vividly, I gather.
Yeah. It's a difficult one, I think, because when they're very young and small, you can do whatever you want because they don't have a say really. But then the more they start speaking and they have their own mind, then you have to factor that in, of course. But yes, like Philip said, you take breaks. Now, when I do hiking trips with them, it's about where could we walk to, and telling them that they need to help me get 10,000 steps. And so it's about somehow making it a game, making it a bit exciting. And I think what also helps for me is that when I tell them this is what's going to happen tomorrow, this is what we're doing, like, so they're prepared mentally about what we're doing.
Makes sense. I traveled for 8 months When my two eldest kids were 3 and 5, we left. They were 4 and 5 when we got back. And well, first of all, they had each other, so that helped for the playmates. But we actually got into a habit of getting up rather early, having full breakfast wherever we started from and wherever we stayed, and then having the more serious topics in the morning. So if I really wanted to see a museum, we would go there. And then when I couldn't sort of get them to keep concentrated or somewhat quiet any longer, or by bribing them with candy or whatever I did, then we would have actual lunch, making sure that this is where we would try everything local, take our time eating. And then in the afternoon, maybe the park, botanical garden, anything else that had to do with more physical activity and something lighter. And then being back somewhat early and maybe just bringing a sandwich or some kind of takeaway home with us. And in the evening, getting them to actually draw what they experienced, because in that way that could help them both digest whatever they experienced during the day and also remember it. Those are some quite cute sort of piles of drawings we have from those 8 months around the world at that time. So that's definitely my recommendation for traveling with that age. Another topic, though, is kids and traveling with them when they get older. Jennifer, you have older children.
Yeah, mine are now 17, 16, and 14. The two boys are the oldest, and then our youngest is our daughter. And they can pack themselves now. They carry their own luggage. Sometimes they carry my luggage. They know not to touch anything that's going to require a rabies or a tetanus shot, which is all really great. But the days of sharing one hotel room as all 5 of us are gone. So I think financial implications we look at a bit more closely now. And then also they're at this age where they get their first car and they're heading off to uni. So you have all these other financial personal purchases that you've got to look at. So I think your priorities start to shift a little. And ours are in traditional schooling, so maximizing holiday time is a really big deal. But similar to what you were saying about letting them digest what they've seen or experienced in a day, they now articulate their thoughts about what they've experienced. We've had amazing conversations about how their past travels and their past relocations have actually influenced their character, and they see the difference between themselves and their peers that maybe haven't traveled as much. And seeing their individual travel personalities is actually pretty cool too, and how they're becoming their own person in that part of their lives.
Wonderful. Merete, you also have a daughter of 12, so slightly older than what we started out with.
That's true. And I think it has changed a lot during the last 8 years where I've been traveling with her by myself. I've learned much more about her character now. I know how much she can take, but I also let her decide with me what we want to see. And I try also to stay put for a few days in the same place so we can become a bit grounded, and also let inspiration just take us on what is it that we would like to see. So she's just much more involved now than she has been before. And also we like to do road trips. So I give her the time in the car when we go from A to B, for example, could be some hours, could be a full driving day. So I give that time to her. And if she wants to be on the screen, or FaceTiming her friends and stuff like that, or we listen to music or audiobooks and stuff like that, I give her that time. And then when we reach our destination and we stay there for a few days, I put together an itinerary of what I think we could see, and then we try to decide those things together now. So it has definitely changed, and her character has also changed in that, where she could become quite stressed before if there was too many activities, but now she, we found our travel I don't know, mood together. Let's say it like that.
Very cool. Jason, do you have a travel story with your two kids? Something from a specific country that made an impression?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we all have tons of travel stories. I think before any stories, if we're talking about traveling with teens, my thoughts to the audience today would be the beauty of traveling with teens is we all know how frustrating they can be, right? That's the age where they're adulting, they're pushing back, they're sometimes difficult to communicate with. And by traveling with them, excuse me, I would strongly recommend to anyone in the audience, use it as a time to really tap into their passions. When kids are younger, we tend to travel where we want and drag them along, and they experience the adventure. In the teenage years, they really start to know not necessarily what they want from their lives, but at least their passions. My 15-year-old son, he's my ocean kid. And since the age of 12, we've been scuba diving together. My daughters are horseback riding kiddos. So every time that we travel, as much as it's painful to me, but we're horseback riding. So I really encourage you to take the opportunity to tap into the passions of your teenager. Travel where you can pursue those passions, and that connection can be absolutely amazing.
I really salute that point.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said.
Yeah. My eldest daughter studies international business in Asia. That means that anything Asian are interesting, especially when it's high tech. So we traveled around South Korea together, and she planned the entire trip and took us there. And we had a real crisis when I was at some point when trying to change the itinerary. That was just not acceptable. We've also tried that pretty much in Japan, where they took me to a manga festival that I would have never gone to otherwise, and I absolutely loved it. And at one point, I brought the two eldest together to Somaliland. And that was actually interesting because my daughter and I went straight to the market and bought local clothes. And my son looked at us like, okay, I'm going to keep my own clothes. And he could because he was a man. But we knew that if we wore the clothes of the local women, we would get into that society a lot more easy. And we even brought scarves, not covering completely, but a bit. And for them to see that physically and see the difference between how he could travel and she could travel when they were around this sort of 20, 21, that was really interesting. And it gave such good debates during our trip and such good reflections from them, because now they were there and they could feel it and they could see how everybody else reacted to them. And during that trip, we were really welcomed for having done this in the countryside, whereas when we were in the capital, a lot of the more well-educated women said to my daughter and I that they would rather that we did not wear a headscarf because they were trying to push back on religion, forcing them to do this, and they wanted to be able to have the choice. So in that way, we also saw the different parts of society and how that reflected. So that was really a good learning experience as well. And then when we travel like that, once in a while, it can be dangerous because we've got a responsibility for the kids. And if we travel alone with them, it's just us. And Merete, I know that you had that sort of really felt that very recently. Could you tell this story?
Yeah, unfortunately, my daughter and I, we were in China and in Japan this February and March. And on the second day in China, we went to the Great Wall, of course, and then I fell because, the steps are steep and high and crooked, and I fell and I sprained my foot and I broke a bone in my foot as well. And I think, standing in that situation on the Great Wall with my daughter, 12 years old, and who's not panicking, but, afraid, what are we going to do, Mom? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was in pain and just sitting there and nobody really, was helping me or anything. It's a good thing I'm an emergency room nurse, so I know what to do. But I definitely had to reach out to others for help, and I think that was quite an important lesson, is to understand the vulnerability when you are a single parent and you're far away from home, and having to rely on other people's kindness and for other people to help you. And I think that was actually the most conversation we had about this, because the injury was the injury, and you know, I figured it out. We went to Japan, I went to the hospital, you know, everything was fine. Of course, our trip was very changed to what we had initially planned, but the talks about having to rely on other people, how do you do that? How are you vulnerable when you travel? What can we do to help each other? What can we do to secure each other? What should she do if something happens? Of course, we had this conversation a long time ago as well, but now it actually became into practice. And I think, you know, the major lesson for her was also that besides having to take extra responsibility, she saw that if people are in need, you need to help them, no matter where you are and who you are. And I think that was really an important lesson from that trip. So yeah, I'm going to watch my step a bit better next time we travel.
Ouch. Yeah. I think, Philip, you had a travel experience
Actually experience in that way. When I traveled across South America, I really took very much care about me, what I ate actually, because I know if I have anything about food poisoning, my body reacts very heavy, and then I'm unable to do anything. So I made absolutely sure just to eat proper food on my side, to be fit for the kids, not to end up in the bed with 42 degrees fever and not being able to do anything. The other thing is, we are quite lucky living in the mountains, so the kids really know to take care about places where they can fall down or things like that. And this is something that is really helping in South America, because there are often no rails, nothing to hold on, and it's just going down on the side of the road, because there's just a stair going down, and you need to be quite careful. And I was quite happy that the boys already watched out for dangers like this, because they know it from home, and this helped a lot. On the other hand side, traveling alone, also I had the feeling that in most places there were dozens of people also having an eye on my kids when I was there. Sometimes they were looking to them even closer than I did, and so really, if there were others around, there wasn't really a danger, because this was like a village looking for my kids in most places.
Very cool.
I add something to this.
Yeah.
So just real quickly, again, this is more for those maybe in the audience who haven't traveled as much, and I know everyone on this panel will back me up on this. Don't be afraid to travel to regions and countries that maybe are in the news as having a lot of problems or conflict. Do your research, certainly, but my son and I, we traveled in Ethiopia at the height of their conflict there, but the conflict was in the north, and we traveled in the south, and we had an amazing time. Right now, Ecuador's in the news, but my son's going to go there for his study abroad with his school, and I'm not worried at all, because they're going to go to places that are safe. So don't let the news dissuade you from at least exploring, traveling to places that you wouldn't think to travel.
I think that's a very, very good point. Merete, you travel with Doctors Without Borders. So you've definitely probably the one of us who have traveled yourself to the most dangerous places and the most.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't know, but of course, traveling with Doctors Without Borders means that we actually go to the north of Ethiopia, and we work there under conflict and disaster situations. And I absolutely agree what you say, Jason, because I think when you go to a country, there are, pockets of the countries most times where things are quiet and you wouldn't believe that there might be a disaster situation going on or an armed conflict or something like that. But I would say that the majority of the places that I've been with Doctors Without Borders, I wouldn't bring my daughter. And I think that I've even been influenced so much by living under strict security measures in war zones for so long that I'm actually a bit hesitant sometimes to look at new destinations with my daughter. For example, she wants to go to Africa. I would love to show her the Africa that I know and I love, but I have had the experience in many different war zones in Africa that has been quite difficult and traumatizing for me. So I don't feel ready myself because I've seen the harshest, worst parts of that continent. So I'm rediscovering it in a more peaceful way now, and I hope that I can bring my daughter there again, or I can bring her there soon.
Yeah. There's also different kinds of risk. At least I've been very conscious about that when I've traveled with my children. I traveled with my eldest daughter when she was around 20 in Syria. And it was an amazing round trip. And despite the fact that their buildings were ruins and homes are very, very damaged, you could have forgotten that this had been a war zone. But what we did was we were planning all up until we actually went there. And when we heard that there had been an attack and an ISIS leader had been killed recently, just before we came, we sort of changed the route in order not to be the ones whom somebody might retaliate on. And we were conscious of what we did, but mostly what we did there was to make sure we had really good local contacts and all the papers were okay, and they would make sure that with all the roadblocks that it was somebody who was approved by the regime, so that also they had a kind of a prestige invested in being able to protect us. So in that way, I both felt that this was a risk, and at the same time, I knew that we would stay in smaller places, family-owned places, as where we would not be so obvious, and otherwise we were staying in the bigger places where the UN were there as well. And sometimes I basically felt both more and less protected by doing that. So we were sort of making sure what we were doing. And we have been traveling Mauritania as well and in the same way, thinking about where is it safe, where is it not safe in the country at that particular time. We were there traveling with the local fixer we knew was really experienced in getting experienced travelers safely in and out of the country, and relying on his knowledge locally of where to go and where not to go. And again, going a bit under the radar, just being us, not checking in, not standing out too much, even though we still do because we're tall and blonde. But those experiences were just amazing because it was countries that there were not so many people in, so many visitors, and those that we met, we had that much more interesting conversations with. So I really appreciated it. But I think it takes some consciousness of what to do, as it always does when you travel in conflict zones. Anyone else who wants to chip in with a story of traveling somewhere that others would deem irresponsible?
It's definitely gonna happen. Hasn't done it yet because it's small, but I'm sure we're gonna get there.
Well, you're probably going to take them climbing the 7 summits, and so in that way, I would definitely deem it dangerous.
Just do that if he wants. I'll take him rock climbing though. We have started indoor climbing, and he loves that. So the next step will be rock climbing, of course.
See, a lot of us also travel with children to some of the least visited countries. And even though a country is very little visited, doesn't mean that it's dangerous in any way. Hey, but sometimes a lot of people would have no idea what this country is like. So maybe some of you could share a story or two of how that was. Jennifer, how about you?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, we've relocated a lot. We are originally from the US. We moved to Switzerland. We moved to Singapore, and we're actually in Australia at the moment. And I actually thought it was pretty honest and open of some of our friends when we moved to Singapore to honestly say, where is that on a map? I think it has something to do with pirates, like just stuff that they didn't know about countries that this community would probably, just brush off their shoulder is obvious. So I appreciated their honesty with us there. But yeah, you can definitely get off the beaten path with children outside of conflict zones. We lived just across the border from Liechtenstein, and that's one of the least visited countries according to numbers. And it's still a bit of a novelty to us. It's still fun and interesting, even though we lived right next door to it. And same with Oceania. They make up half the list of least visited top 20 countries. And despite living next door to them in Australia, it took us 4 separate trips to get there. We probably shouldn't have started right after COVID, especially since this region wasn't really open. But I can also see now with those smaller countries, that they may lack activities, especially for the older group of kids, or even an active adult. Like some of us were talking about being able to just, throw your kid in a park anywhere in the world and they're happy as clams, is certainly one approach. But with teens, longer stays in some of these smaller countries aren't always the best thing. Sometimes it's nice to hop around and keep moving. So I think every corner of the world is pretty rewarding, as long as you do your homework and set expectations.
Definitely. Wani, have you brought your children to some of the least visited countries in the world as well? I believe you have.
No, I don't know. I think for me, it was just Nicaragua alone with 3 kids was just a nightmare, trying to be in the jungle and nothing worked. Mosquitoes, 9 hours of time difference. Obviously, no internet because there's constant power cuts, so even the fan doesn't work. And by day 10, they were crying, saying they wanted to go back to Switzerland. And I'm like, we cannot go back to Switzerland because it's COVID, and we can't fly via from Managua because it would be by the US, and the US was still closed. And so I did the next best thing, and I got us out of this place, and I found an Airbnb up in the hills. There was AC, things worked, there was a TV, I could work again. But then I was dealing with the absolute basics, right? Like, what do we do for food? And there's only so much of, the kids were like 6, 4, and 3. So there was only so much of, okay, which picture do you want to choose? And then sometimes I just have to throw them in the back of the car, which is like, it's completely hot. And we're going down into the town and finding, I don't know what there is. What saved me was this jars of Nutella. So a small tiny jar of Nutella was $8.50 US. And then finding toast bread, because obviously all the panaderia were selling baguettes, and my 3-year-old would say no skin, and you try to get the skin off a baguette and you're left with nothing. So it was just dealing with the small basic necessities, like where do you get food, what are they going to eat, and that was a nightmare for me.
All right.
And I didn't even say about the fact that the 4-year-old had a toothache problem. And so I was trying to look for a dentist in Nicaragua, a dentist that would deal with kids. Seriously, 30 kilometers for the next place, a dentist that would look at this kid. It's like an hour away, obviously. And it's just, oh my God, I'm like, why? And why did the stupid dentist in Switzerland not take this kid in before we had to go? But of course, it's Switzerland. And, there's like the longest list of people waiting to get to see the dentist. So we couldn't get that treated before we went. So it was those basics. Exasperating.
I think one of the things with traveling in some of the least traveled places in the world is, again, some of the surprises that you find. I know that at least for US passport holders, one of the countries that supposedly is very difficult to travel to is Turkmenistan. So last winter we said, well, let's go to Turkmenistan and heck, let's visit all 5 stands. And surprisingly, the visa process was a lot easier than I was seeing on these blogs online, again, at least for a US passport holder. But my point is that we went there and it was kind of the goal country because it was listed as such a difficult place to go. But we had the most amazing experience actually across on the other side of the stands in Tajikistan, which borders, as everyone knows, Afghanistan. Just an incredible experience. The mountains are so amazing. So again, I think sometimes pushing yourself to try to travel to some of these places that you see even in travel blogs that, oh, this is an incredibly difficult place to go. You're going to have just incredible experiences, and maybe not even in the way that you expect.
I definitely had that same experience with Turkmenistan, with all of my 3 kids just 1 year ago. And we absolutely loved it. And it was just, sometimes it was not the things that I thought were going to be the biggest experiences in Turkmenistan that ended up being it. So definitely standing at the gate to hell, this open burning crater, everybody loved, and being out there at night, having a barbecue, sleeping in a yurt, everybody thought that was cool. But actually, my kids thought it was equally cool to go to a pilgrimage church in the middle of absolutely nowhere, where the locals will go to church and we would be able to interact with them during the day. They would come out, breaking bread, having fun with us, having a lot of time with each other, so we could sort of be part of that somehow. And all of the gravestones were without heads. And kids thought that was some of the most bizarre, especially then when they heard it was because Genghis Khan had apparently cut off the head of these poor people before they were buried. So they were literally buried in tombstone, in sort of stones where it looked like an angel with no head. And then another place where they had sort of craniums from animals with big horns, so the goats and everything, and depending on how they looked, it was supposed to say something about how they did in life and whether they were going to go to heaven or something. And just those things actually made a much bigger impression on my kids, at least, than I think any of us had sort of planned for it to do. And in many times more impression actually than the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So sometimes it's the people and the quirkiness that sticks, especially with teenagers. My experience. How about when they meet corruption? Mine are very sort of righteous and very just. So when we traveled in Equatorial Guinea, with the amount of corruption we met, every roadblock, every marketplace, the wildlife that they were selling. We even saw a mandrill being sold as bushmeat. That really made an impression on my daughter, that's for sure, and gave a lot of these conversations about wildlife and nature protection, sustainable both living and traveling, and also a bit of a wish to change the world here and now. Maybe choosing jobs later on that would have something to do with making a better world.
That's actually why I love for us to travel, is I'm hoping that they find that inspiration to pick their path in the future. And actually in West Africa, it wasn't really surprisingly, about corruption, but we were in a market and there was a girl younger than my daughter that was working in the market, and she got into an argument with her boss, who might have been a family member, and it got kind of violent. And it was actually pretty affronting, specifically to my daughter. I guess, my boys were, they're kind of used to, testosterone and play fighting and things like that. But this was pretty affronting to her. And I think that it was something that was a big conversation later on between us about the differences in our lives and her life. And, why would her boss treat her that way? And there's a lot of life lessons out there that pop up that, you're not planning on. And it makes for good conversations.
Yeah, it definitely does. Maybe this is a good time to take on the topic of teaching while on the road, that whole educational part of it. Merete, you were doing that very consciously, you told.
Yes, I mean, it started a bit as a funny joke. I called it when I took her on my first travel by ourselves, and we just went to Paris. I mean, it was no big deal. And people were starting to comment on Facebook, and I said, oh, it's so great that you take her traveling this young. And I was like, yeah, it's the Globetrotter education. And then the more I thought about it, my life has been immensely influenced by the travels that I've done, especially, of course, without Doctors Without Borders. And I just thought that there was so much great teaching in that. So I just started to build a concept of what is it that we actually learn as human beings when we travel. And sometimes it's humorous, and other times it's actually quite serious what it is that we learn. And I think one of the things that I care most about, it's her understanding that people are not that different. And there is no reason to be scared of people that look different, love different, believe different than us. And especially, I always ask her to try to notice when we travel how women live and how girls live, so that she also understand how fortunate we are in many ways in living in the Northern European region as we do, and make her reflect on that. And then we often, find the history lessons of the country, the traumas of the country, and so on and so on. So she's very excited about starting geography next year because she really thinks that she's going to ace it.
Wonderful.
I
Any
haven't done
observations?
any systematic teaching, but it's obvious that the boy at 7 is starting to think about things, observing and actually posing good questions to things. And like a couple of weeks ago, we were in Monaco for a weekend, and he was noticing that the houses were pretty nice, and many of the cars were pretty nice. So we had some conversations about where people are rich and things like that, which is. So he does notice differences. The kids do notice differences between their own country and where they go, and start making questions. Why is it like that, and why is it like that? So obviously we can teach them things by taking them traveling.
Definitely.
Maybe to add something here, also it's not really about teaching, but how the children are learning. Actually, when we arrived in Brazil last year, we had to stay for 2 days in a hotel with a big pool area, and Lucas, the big one, actually is quite reluctant doing new things. But there were a lot of Brazilian children there, and they teach him immediately how to run and jump into the pool, holding his nose, not to get any water inside. And he learned this immediately, and he did it all over the trip. And that's something that he would never have learned at home, because children need other children to learn things like that.
Actually, we can learn from the kids, because they, when they meet someone, that is friends that they just haven't met before. Everybody you meet is a friend. And for my kid, for him, it's natural to become friends with everybody he meets. And he gets disappointed if he can't communicate with them, or if they don't care to be playing with him. So we should maybe turn the teaching around sometimes and see. Of course, we who travel are maybe maybe a little better than the average in looking at other foreign people as friends or possible friends. But anyway, that they are definitely more 100% into, okay, that's another kid there. He's my friend.
You can also learn a lot from nature and from being in nature with your kids. So let's hear some stories about that. Vani, how about you?
So again, I think COVID screwed up everybody's travel plans, and so the best we could do was we drove down to the Dolomites, and I said I need to do this Tre Chime hike, which is the one that I've had on my list for the longest time. The kids were, I guess, 5, 4, and 2. And never done really any hiking up until then. And this was supposed to be a 10-kilometer, 550 meters elevation gain hike. And I thought, how on earth do we do this? And so we just said, okay, come on, let's go. 2 weeks before, we did a 9-kilometer hike, and then but not much elevation gain. And on the day itself, when we did it, we were the ones with the smallest kids. The 2-year-old was with me. I was carrying him the entire time. And then as soon as it starts going up, it's a question of, how do we motivate them to go, right? And so it's questions like, so what's your favorite Paw Patrol character? What did you watch on Peppa Pig yesterday? Just random little things. And it's just about to get them off of their head and, I guess keep them motivated somehow. And in that way, you still get to do what you want to do, although you are like taking forever to get it done, but it's still possible.
Perfect. Philip, you're a lot in nature with your kids as well.
Yeah, we do so, and for hiking. So our older one, the 6-year-old one, he already can do real hikes, like an average hiker can do something like 800 meters in altitude gain a day and going up and down on the same day. It takes some time, but he's doing that quite well. But it's always important to find something to motivate him, as Vani said before. Like, for example, in spring or in early summer, when you find a lot of berries around the way, to find some motivation. Let's look for blueberries, for strawberries, whatever you find. Then whatever animals you can find, snails, birds, whatever is interesting, and that's quite motivating for him and getting him really up the mountain, and he can really walk normal distances now that an average hiker can also do. But what's important in somehow alpine environments is you as a parent, you need to be totally sure what you are doing, and you need to be totally comfortable with the path that you're walking. If you're afraid falling down somewhere, then there's no way to go there with your child, because you need to be confident and also show this to your kid that he's also confident.
So is that the same for you when you're hiking?
Actually, I came to think of I should remember this when we had the 4-year-old question. 3 years ago, we did a hike to the volcano in Iceland that was alive. And that was a 10-mile walk for a 4-year-old kid. That worked well. It needs some persuasion and a good deal of candy, but it worked. We got there, and only at the very end, coming back, I had to carry him a little bit, but that was well done, and there was he will be doing that kind of things because that he's getting used to it step by step. So I'm confident that we'll do more hikes.
Yeah. I think definitely when they get older, they also get more confident and they take more responsibility. So definitely in the Faroe Islands, I can be pretty sure I will be the one who will get a hand now, because they want to go as far and as high and as steep as they want to go. And then I have to be the one who are absolutely pushed to my limit in order to go with them to whatever that drone has to be flown from or whatever. So I have had at least a group of 5 young men sort of in their late 20s who looked somewhere between annoyed and completely sort of losing their lower chin when I came with 3 kids and a drone onto the place where they were just sitting and being so cool about that they managed to get up. So sometimes that also was where we get to go, at least, and definitely it felt 200 times more cool for me to get there when I saw that the men in their late 20s actually thought that they were cool for getting there. But I think maybe also we get more brave as we travel. That trip around the world I did when the kids were 3 and 5, that were 8 months. At the end of that trip, we were swimming in the Amazon River just as we'd just been fishing, piranhas, that particular place. And we knew that there would be huge anacondas and crocodiles or in the river at that place. And the locals told us, this is going to be fine. You're having a great time. You're going to go swimming. And we did. And, my parents and they're definitely my in-laws were a bit like, are you sure you're a responsible parent at this point? But, it went perfect. We had a great time. And again, the locals said this is going to be fine. And we took their words for it. So sometimes I think it's also just taking it as it goes along. And had it been on the first 2 weeks of that trip, we would not have done it. But now we've been traveling for 7 months at that point, and it seemed completely not unproblematic until I saw the pictures and the reactions from back home. So yeah. And then you can actually take sort of that whole learning and traveling for a long time even further, because you can get posted and literally working abroad, or you can be a digital nomad working abroad as well. And quite a few here have done that. So let's have some stories of how that differ or how that turns out with children as well. Vani, I know you have had children with you and you've worked while you've traveled.
Yeah, so I'm lucky because I have my own recruitment company, and essentially I can talk to people just via Zoom. And so during COVID, it was I took the boys on my own to Cape Verde, and I'm really desperately trying to work after breakfast every morning at the beach restaurant. And so I tell the kids, go, the beach is right there. But of course, I tell the lifeguard, can you please watch the boys? And there I am, just working until somebody comes to me and goes, I have sand in my eyes. And so, I go trying to, save this kid while I'm still trying to get work done. But again, same thing in Nicaragua. I'd be having calls with people in Austria or London, and the boys are just running around. Either they're playing with the dog or the neighbors next door, and or watching TV or whatever. And again, survival. I work on the go, and when the kids are there, I try to do the least I can, but I still manage to get things done.
Yeah. Wonderful. Anyone else who wants to chip in with the story of working abroad? Nope. I worked abroad for 4 years as a diplomat with 3 kids on a posting. And that definitely was a whole other experience, because then you have your everyday life. It's just moved. So then you're abroad, you're away from grandparents, you're away from your network. And the school is new. So my youngest, he went to a Danish kindergarten, then a Swedish kindergarten, then an English language school. And then when I told her we were moving back home, she was like, okay, now what language am I going to speak in this school? And she looked completely relieved when I said Danish. And she was like, oh, but I know that already. She had the idea that every time we changed, she would have to learn a new language as well. Then we started learning Chinese, and then I screwed that whole thing up again, but still. But I think what my kids definitely learned from being in international school was these wonderful birthday parties where everybody would play sort of completely mixed. You could not really feel necessarily what countries they were from. That had nothing to do with the games as such. Actually, it was only when the parents came in that sometimes it did become an issue. So if we would have something over a weekend, then the kids from Africa might not even be allowed to participate. Those from Asia might not be allowed to stay overnight. The Americans would not eat half of the things I thought I was going to serve, and would come with boxes that would handle any kind of allergies I had no idea kids would have. And we would end up being the cruel Viking parents who would actually let them play with knives, cutting their own food and helping us prepare for it. So I would have the horror in the eyes of 10 parents who would come in and see all kids were having knives in their hands in the kitchen. So in that way, we would end up having all of these differences, but actually it was mostly when the parents were there. When they were not there, I think it just blended in perfectly together. I think we should, one of the last topics that we've talked about having, just to sort of sum up a few good stories to end this whole webinars of ours, might be about the solo traveling dads, because we started this seminar thinking, oh, we might only be women. And then we insisted ourselves that we would have a few dads here as well, which I'm really happy that we have. Is there something very special to traveling as a dad, solo traveling with his children? Jason, how about you?
Yeah, for sure. My first horror story was traveling with my oldest Hunter when he was, he was about, I think he was not even 2 years old, and we're in Cuba, and I made the mistake of feeding him ceviche, and as he's projectile vomiting all over the table, and I'm holding him up with this panic look on my face, like, okay, I'm way out of my league, I don't know what to do. Just the all the helping hands that came and helped navigate that, and again, we all have story after story of the funny, ridiculous things that we learn lessons from. I think as a dad, and I steal from my profession when I say this. I work in child trauma professionally, and I think the biggest thing traveling as a dad is, let's face it, kids are going to miss their mom, and they're going to cry over it, and that's okay, and that's okay. I think the key is really just connecting with them where they're at. We talked early on about 4-year-olds. We talked about teenagers, and one of the things that we practice in child trauma is really learning to be with the kiddo in that moment, and to ask good questions. We as adults, we tend to teach or preach, and maybe instead of teaching or preaching, if we learn to ask, we find so much out about them. And using those open-ended questions. We as adults are good about the yes, no's. We want the answers. And instead asking the tell me more about this, letting them explore their language, letting them pontificate on what it is that they're seeing. And it may not be things that we want to even teach them in the moment, but it's just about connecting with them.
Perfect. So,
For the first 5 years of his of the kid's life, we were married, so I had a lot of time with him. But he obviously spent a lot of time with his mother in his early years, as kids do. But I had some years where I was not working too much, only as a travel guide, and therefore I was often home, and I was the guy I was the one taking him to kindergarten. So I did bond with him also well before we got divorced, and so it's not something that I had to start doing after that. And so I don't think the traveling and being with him without the mama in the vicinity is such a big thing for us, because he chooses to be with me sometimes without his mother in nearby.
Maybe you do something different because it's just the two of you.
Yeah, I think actually we bond pretty well when we get out in nature, just camping in the local forest, or if we're traveling somewhere. He requires certain time on the electronics, on media, but it's easier to keep it down when we're actually traveling or out in the woods. So in that way it's good, and I think we tend to bond because I mean I can't be 100% part of his daily life at the moment, but when we travel we get some memories together that are only ours.
Wonderful. How about you, Philip? Do you travel differently with your boys when it's just you, rather than when you travel with Verena, the mother, as well?
I think the way we travel is pretty much the same. There are some things which definitely help. Like as Søren said, it helps a lot to be involved in the kids' everyday life, also at home. If you wake them up in the morning, get them to the kindergarten, get them into bed in the evening, prepare the food from time to time, it's much easier also to do that when you're traveling, because you know the children better. You know what they like, what you don't like in the everyday things that are around, and this helps a lot. I think if you're not that much involved as a father at home, then it's much harder if you're traveling and you're getting closer to those everyday things that you need to manage then somehow besides traveling. This is one point. The other point I noticed very much from women that we met abroad, that they were severely concerned about having no mother around, so that the kids are really happy with the mother being some 1,000 kilometers away, and they couldn't imagine that the kids are happy with that. I don't know where this came from, but it was hard to imagine for them, obviously. And just to add something for that, just to come to an end, somehow if you travel abroad, you need some kind of confirmation that you are allowed to travel as a sole parent with both of your kids. Actually, Verena, my wife, she's always asked for this shitty paper. I was traveling all from Europe to South America, around South America, going back to Europe. I was never asked for this paper.
Yeah, actually, when I was applying for visa to Oman here half a year ago, I think there was a question that I needed a permission from the mother to take the kid. I don't know if they have some experience with parents or kidnapping their kids because they have a fight with the one they divorced. I think it comes from some kind of thing like that. I don't think I ever did prove that she was okay with us traveling, but I saw the question somewhere in the system.
I will promise you, as a former diplomat and somebody who wished to travel to every country in the world, that this is a real thing. And me being divorced, and among others, being divorced because I wanted to travel more. Oh, trust me, that is a very real thing, that you need these papers. It's very different around the world. So South Africa might be one of the worst or the most harshest or strictest countries. I think it's because all of the NGOs traveled there during apartheid, and because they're so conscious about kid trafficking. And it seems like all of the NGOs managed to go to Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and also Zambia, and then not a lot further, actually. So that whole area is really strict. And a few of the others around the world are as well. I just realized that for China, very specifically, the paper has to say from specifically that date to that date, and that should correspond with the dates of your flight tickets. So, and that was the first time in the world I've been confronted with that particular requirement towards this particular paper. And you even have to go to a notar and have it stamped if it has to be completely certain. And for those of us who are divorced, that might actually be a real issue. So yeah, That is definitely something you should be aware of.
Just one other thing for fathers traveling with daughters, everything that everyone's saying, there's going to be a difference. Again, I have a daughter and a son. I travel solo with each of them. I definitely have more interactions at airports, hotels, and such when I'm traveling with my daughter. Early on, it offended me because I'm thinking, I'm dad. Stop questioning me. I'm dad. This is my daughter. I'm the one that's protecting her. Don't let it offend you, dads. It's just people in these lines of work who are looking out for human trafficking. So just be aware that you're probably going to get a little bit more scrutiny if you're a single dad traveling with a daughter.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's take around with the mothers. How is it maybe solo traveling as a woman with your children? Anything specifically that comes to mind there? Something specifically you can do or you experience when you're in this situation?
I usually say it's like, going in the street with a puppy. People want to talk to you, when you bring your child. And that's my experience. Fortunately, my daughter is very open, very social, and likes to speak to everyone. But I really do feel that I have a lot more contact with others when I travel, and locals and so on, because we are mother and daughter. So that's a really positive thing. I'm also identify as LGBTQI+, and therefore I have to bring papers as well, showing that my daughter actually has two moms. And that is a bit of a concern to me sometimes when we travel, because if I have to show the letter, the immigration will know that my daughter has two mothers, and we might be in a country where that is illegal, for example. So that is one of the challenges that we have. And then I also tell my daughter not to speak about it, and she has a father. His name is Henry. When she's in Denmark, she has another mother. Her name is Heidi. And I also speak about my ex-partner as a male and not as a female. But I mean, that's just an extra added challenge to our travels, let's say it like that.
Yeah. And of course, when you have an ex-partner, you need the permission, and that can be difficult as well. I think my youngest have had 5-6 countries that she would have visited by now, if it hadn't been for this is too dangerous. Do not go to Lviv in Ukraine, or do not go to even Uganda, actually. So a few places where I've been like, I would really have liked to have taken her, and I couldn't. So that's really annoying, though. But I was thinking also more of the fact that I am pretty gender conscious when I travel. I'm conscious that I'm a woman and a woman traveler. I see a lot of men traveling, and they have photos from Pakistan, and they are all men that they've met. And it seems like they've traveled as a human being, meeting other human beings. And I'm like, but they only met men. Didn't they ever consider that there were no women, unless maybe it's a small child or this extremely wrinkled grandmother they photographed because they thought she was cute? So to me, it's really important that we meet other women, and we're really conscious about seeing what are the life conditions of other women, and I educate both my daughters and very much also my son about this, to be really conscious about how are these situations of life, what does this mean, and why is it so important that we have the privileges, the human rights, the access to abortion, contraception, family planning, everything in Denmark that we do have. What does it mean how does it look when we travel when this is not the case? So for us, that's definitely a huge deal. And for me, traveling as a mother compared to traveling as a spouse or traveling solo, it takes out a lot of the being a woman and being somebody sexual out of the equation of traveling as well. When I'm with the kids, for example, if I travel in Arab Northern Africa, then I'm the head of the family. That it gives a completely different respect, and then sometimes also safety to us compared to if we're traveling by ourselves, or if I'm traveling by myself, or if the older children who are now young adults would do it. If you're 22 and a girl, you don't get that respect. If you're a single woman traveling, you don't get that respect. But if you're mother-daughter, mother-child, I see people as really, we're almost sacred. You really have to take good care of us somehow, and everybody can identify with us. So we get invited home. We get these amazing conversations and contacts that both on markets and private homes and everything else that I think we don't get otherwise.
But some places you can, as a woman, you can connect to other women. But in some countries, I cannot connect to another woman without going through her husband or father or brother or something. So as it'll be different who you can meet in a society. And the kids can maybe sometimes soften up the things, but there will still be some social constructions that makes me talking to the woman in Bangladesh, for example, not possible.
That is true. That is very true.
I once were in Bangladesh. That was nothing to do with kids, but with a friend of us from the Danish travel club, and she had been there for a couple of days before I came, and she was tired of being asked where her father was, or her husband, and they couldn't understand she was traveling alone. And then for the first 24 hours I was there, she was happy to not getting all the questions, but then after that she got fed up with me getting the attention because I was the male.
Actually, I worked for 7 months in Afghanistan in a little village when I was working in the field. And I was really thinking a lot about going to Afghanistan as a woman, and thinking, would I even be able to work, looking at the gender roles that there are in Afghanistan. And what I experienced is maybe also a bit what you're describing, Søren, and what I experienced during my travels is that when you are a foreign woman, it's kind of like blurs the lines a bit about the rules. So meaning that, and as you say, Mette, also you're head of the family. I saw that, I was considered an authority because I came from this NGO. So I could actually work with the women, but I could also work with the men. So in a town where the gender separation was extreme, I was actually the only one who could float between the two genders and have meaningful contacts with both of them and do the nursing care that I needed to do. So I would say that I actually find it to be such an advantage to be a woman traveling, of course. And I think what you said, Mette, in terms of being considered sexual and having a bit of a fear of, meeting men and so on and so on. Traveling with a child kind of also blurred the lines for that.
A little bit.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All I can say is, even though when I travel sometimes without my kids, like to West Africa, for example, the fact that I'm a mother with 3 kids, I can just go out to random people who I don't speak the same language with, and I just show them pictures, and it somehow connects us. And I like that because, in the end, as parents, we all care about our children, and yeah, it's a nice way to connect with people.
Definitely. Jennifer, you have the last word.
I probably don't deserve that, so Søren can go ahead.
Can I just have one last comment after that?
Yeah, actually, you can take the last word. I don't travel solo very often with my children, except for when my husband's headed back to work. So it's the end of our trip and we're nice and relaxed. So I get the perk of I guess having my husband around, and he's super supportive. Even when the guide wants to talk to him and not me, even though I planned every single detail of the trip, he steps aside and makes sure that they're speaking to me. So it's nice to have his support.
Wonderful. So
Yeah, the last thing I had I felt like saying is having traveling with kids gives you an opportunity, which is also in the general of having kids, to being silly and to play around, and like passing some time in an airport can pass easier if you have the kid around and you can play on the stairs or be silly or chase each other down the corridors and things like that. We do that often, and I enjoy being like a kid.
It's definitely quality time, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is true. They remind us being in the moment and not only having a great time in the 5 hours when we arrive at this particular destination. It has to be a good time at any given time, any given moment. That is true.
The road becomes what was it that they used to say? Yeah, it's not only reaching the hotel or whatever, it's also the whole process is actually, I enjoy it when I travel with him.
Yeah. That is a very good note to end on. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, I could definitely continue this conversation for a long time, but I hope everybody felt that we got around a lot of the big topics with traveling kids in different ages, and that everybody who sees this and listen to this both now and in the coming days, weeks, and months will be inspired and empowered and hopefully dare to go do this themselves, and that they can feel how much we love this and how much we gain from it and how much we are convinced our children gains from it. So thank you so much for being part of sharing all of those experiences and all of those years of traveling. And yeah, goodbye for now.
Thank you, Mette.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.